Hello and welcome to Lightways at Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel, and my guest today is Rebecca Eigen. Hello.
Hello. Good to see you again.
Yes, it's really lovely to have you back. And I know that you have been doing some beautiful work on shadow work. And I've had the great pleasure of listening to some of the workshops that you have done. So it's lovely to be able to talk about that with you today. Um, in particular, there was, I thought, a lovely email that you sent out talking about a red cardinal and the shadow. And so, oh, and in fact, I think that was about projection as well. So maybe it might be a nice place to start with the story of the red cardinal.
Great. Well, what happened was that this happened a long time ago, and it was right after the market crash in the 80s. And a really close friend of mine who I had been in a prayer group with as a couple, my boyfriend and I, and him and his wife, were in a prayer group for a while. And we were really very close. And one day I don't remember it, inadvertently, I sent him an email. Oh, he sent me an email about how horrible the economy was. And I sent an email back saying, oh, I don't think it's as bad as all that. I mean, that's what I said, because at that time, I'm a graphic designer and I had Exxon Chemical as a client, Oceaneering International as a client. I had these big clients. I was making tons of money. And I really wasn't aware of the stock market at all, because I've never even learned about it. Not interesting to me. So he wrote back that he thought I was being sarcastic, and or he was offended by what I said. And I wrote back and said, well, I didn't really understand. I said something back to him. Anyway, it went back and forth twice. To make a long story short, he was offended that he thought I was being sarcastic. Well, emails are not the way to communicate with anybody. And I was very annoyed that I was being misunderstood. And at that moment, I was at a UAC, believe it or not, in Orlando, Florida. And I was in my hotel room. And a red cardinal came to the sliding glass door and started pecking at itself in the window. And I was astounded. I mean, I looked at the red cardinal and I went, oh my God, we are shadow boxing. So instead of emailing him back, because his last email was like 8 pages, and I was just sitting there fuming, like, why is he sending me all this? I called him and I said, Jim, I love you. And whatever I said to offend you, I'm sorry. Our relationship is more important to me than everything we're arguing about, and it doesn't make any difference. And I just want you to know how much I really appreciate our friendship. And he said, I love you too. And that softened him, and we were able to now actually talk about what he was excited or upset about. He was upset about the stock market crash. And I was able to explain that I don't even go there. I don't even go there. I don't even know how it works. That's how uninterested I am in the financial markets. That may sound really crazy, but I'm a third house Libra and 5 planets in Libra, communications. So that's all that really interests me, really. And also two planets in the fifth house of creativity and Sag. So I'm a teacher. My Jupiter's in the 10th house. Learning about financial markets is beyond me. I really don't care. At any rate, we were able to resolve our issue like that. But what I loved about the whole thing is that symbolically it represented how we are connected to the entire cosmos. And this has happened to me so many times now. It's just remarkable how the universe is alive. It's alive and we're part of it. We are a living organism. We may think we're separate, but we're not. We are all connected. And until I studied Jungian psychology and he describes the collective unconscious, I didn't understand all that. But that's why we are connected. We're connected through that rhythm of the collective unconscious. And so I've studied Liz Green's books and analytical psychology at the Jung Center here for 25 plus years. And my focus is shadow work, because if we work on our own shadow, if we take our shadow back from each other, we wouldn't be going through all of this division that we have going on. It wouldn't be left against right. It would be policy driven. It wouldn't be ideology driven. And I just, I'm a Libra. I've gotten into politics, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Justice, needs to happen, but with intelligence instead of name calling and fighting and wars. But this is what we live in. This is our world. This is what we live in. So I make a contribution by helping one person at a time, which is how Carl Jung believed that we would change, one person at a time. That's it.
Yes, indeed.
It's my passion.
Well, there was a quote that I read in your email that I particularly liked, and it goes like this: I am willing to see my own shadow because together we create consciousness. And I thought that was a particularly poignant, true, and beautiful statement. It is the very reason why we both do the work that we do. It's because with that clarity to understand what is hiding under the surface within us, we can bring healing, and then we stop um, projecting onto other people and actually seeing them more clearly as well. So then that opens dialogue, and with dialogue, then we have harmony. So I think maybe it would be good for you to talk about the chart and perhaps what stands out for you as an astrologer as being clues to the shadow.
Well, there are lots of places we can project shadow, not just the seventh house, but I specialize in the seventh house in particular because that is a given. That is 100%. It's 180 degrees opposite of our first house. Our first house is our persona, our mask, and in Jungian psychology, they call it our persona. We call it our rising sign, but it's what we identify with. We even look like it. I have Leo rising. Can you tell? And the exact opposite is 180. So whatever sign is there, we least identify with. That is not part of who we think we are. So I had one after another relationships with people with Aquarius energy. Of course, I was married to a man with the moon in Aquarius at exactly 9 degrees on my descendant. I left him when Pluto conjuncted my Venus and went back and forth 5 times for a man who had 5 planets in Aquarius. The universe was begging me to see this part of myself. And so I went through all of that. And as I saw that, I thought it was remarkable and I wanted to share it with other people and everybody I've ever been in a relationship with, men or women that I'm close to, friends, are Aquarians. It's really cool. But that's not the only place. The 12th house can be what's hidden from us as well, psychologically. And also the 8th house it is particularly prone to projection and disowning that in ourselves, especially if any of the uh, planets like Mars or Saturn or Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune are there. Those are disowned easily as well in the 8th house. But any opposition in the chart is going to be problematic because we're going to do one side and then the other side, and we need to balance those two sides and identify with them, both of them. So everything is about opposites, everything.
It is. And, just listening to you, I think the seventh house is so problematic for so many people because it's about relationships. and we think of the problem is that we think about it being centered on the relationship with others, but it's really about our relationship with ourselves, because it is through others that we discover who we are. And although that sounds like a very radical statement to make, it's because others reflect back to us something of ourselves. And oftentimes we're not recognizing that aspect of ourselves. So it might be that we feel that it's a criticism or an attack, um, be- because what we're looking for is comfort and reassurance and validation. And instead, we're getting the hang on a minute, you're not being so nice yourself here. So that's part of it, but it's also the fact that those inner tensions that we have can play out in our relationship with others. And, you know, a good example of this, when dogs meet and they like to sniff each other, they like to um, get to know each other. And we're very familiar with the sniffing bit, but there's the play bit too. And the play bit, and I have clocked many hours watching dogs play because of mine. Um, what they're doing is they are sizing each other up
Mhm.
through that play. That play is their way of relating to each other and working out my strength versus your strength. Which one of us is stronger? Sometimes you see them getting up, and like they're boxing almost. And what they're sizing up is their height. Who can stand up the tallest. There's all of this comparison going on. And I think that is exactly what we do in relationships. And it doesn't matter what the nature of the relationship is, we are measuring ourselves against each other, even though we don't know it. You know, oh, she's so like me, or he's so like me. That's comfortable, or we're completely different. That is us doing what the dogs do, sizing ourselves up against another in order to get a sense of who we are and what we like. So that seventh house is really important in that respect. But I think you're right. For me, the shadow house, actually, it's the eighth house, because it's the cupboard into which the skeletons get thrown. Um, and as I always say to my clients, what gets left in the cupboard begins to fester and creates an almighty stink.
Well, I definitely agree. And I think that the seventh house also is also the shadow house because it's the house of others, number one. Whereas the eighth house is more the house of shared wounds, ruled by Pluto, and the dark side of really bringing up, the shit. Forgive me, but the prima materia is what the alchemists called our stuff. And both of those houses, if you can't get a commitment, you'll never be able to do the eighth house work. So you have to do the commitment first because both people have to make an agreement. No matter what side of you comes out, I'm not leaving. So you have permission to be, which I believe is what freedom is. Having Aquarius there, I'm very Uranian, and I didn't exactly think I was until experience has proved it to me. You have to go through many relationships to see that first you do one side, then you do the other, and then you do this side, and then you do the other, and then you finally come back to the center and go, oh my God, I'm just like them. And I'm, the common denominator and all this stuff. And so that's me. I'm very Uranian. Don't fence me in, moon and Sag. So I'm still single, even though I'm 5 planets in Libra, but my North Node is in Aquarius. So I'm married. I'm married to the group. It's in
Yeah.
the it's in the seventh. It was my fate.
And it's so true, the importance of commitment. Um, because I always think, the seventh house, although it's very challenging in its own right, it's when you get to the eighth house that you start going, oh, whose baggage is this? You know,
Right.
we've got this, your baggage is really, really burdening me. And oh, hang on a minute, that's because I've got my baggage here. So I'm carrying two lots of baggage, and very often we are, both parties are carrying um, lots of joint baggage. So I think, and that's where all of those difficult emotions then come in, as well, because yes, there's that element of projection of the seventh house, and the more we are projecting, the more disappointed we're going to be, because if, let's say, you were talking about Aquarius on the descendant, but let's imagine Pisces on the descendant. And so Pisces on the descendant, very idealistic, very romantic, sees the best in the person, wakes up one morning and goes, oh my God, I have a drug addict next to me. What am I going to do? And then goes through the rescuing, or the attempting to rescue, and it's very, very difficult. Or of course, it could be the other way around, looking to be rescued and discovering that the other person's not the hero. So you have that disillusionment, and then you get the dark feelings that come with the eighth house, which really are actually, as you said, about the emergence of stuff that's been buried before this relationship even began. It just happens that this relationship is bringing out all that rage and everything else that might be there. So
Fear.
it's really quite important. And I think, yep, the 12th house absolutely also has its part to play, because if we think that what's in the 8th house is buried, in the 12th house it's been buried.
For
And
centuries.
yeah,
Been hidden for
it's been
centuries.
buried forever, it seems.
Oh. What I like to tell my clients is hopefully you've attracted somebody where you can both unpack your baggage together. Because don't think you're going to meet anybody without baggage. It is almost essential that we go through a separation. We meet, we fall in love, we see the best qualities in each other initially, and then when we get married, I've only been married once, but I would say technically I've been married 3 times. So long-term commitments. And in those situations, we marry each other, idealizing each other, then the shadow has full permission to surface. And so both people now are letting down their guard, and they're being more of who they actually are, right? And more surfaces being triggered by the other person. So there's a triggering effect that both people are doing, and the unconscious is facilitating arguments. The unconscious in each of them wants them to separate so that they can differentiate, so they can see who each other actually is, not the projected fantasy or the idealization, which is a form of denial. It really is. We're in an illusion. I have this scarf here when I'm teaching, and I go, this is how we marry each other. Looking through a veil of illusion of who we think that person is, and until we marry them, it doesn't come off. So it doesn't matter if you date for 3 years. It doesn't matter how many conversations you've had on the phone. People meet each other and they're on the phone for hours and hours and hours. Oh, great. It's all superficial until you're actually together every day in and day out. That is when everything really comes up. And it's a wonderful experience when you do go through it because you get to know things about yourself you wouldn't have known. There's no way you could have known unless you're in a relationship with somebody, and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, the question that comes up in relationships really is, who are you? And
Mhm.
or who am I? And just listening to you, and it's so true that we can't really truly get to know a person until we're actually living with them, and
Mhm.
we are witnessing their struggles and their challenges and trying to support them, and vice, and hopefully it's it's a two-way thing. So
Mutual.
that's where you really get to know the person, but it also, it's, you have to be very comfortable in order to be able to be yourself. And the thing that came to mind was rescue dogs, funnily enough, listening to you, because one of the big challenges people have with rescue dogs is that they they bring them home, and the dog seems to be adjusting, and it is on best behavior a month, 2 months in, and they think the dog is regressing because the dog is expressing um, anger or reactivity when they're out and about or in the house over different issues. And what people aren't realizing is that actually that's a good thing at that point, because what it means is that that dog is feeling safe enough to express all of those feelings. And now they can really begin the healing work to help
Mhm.
the dog. So to rescue a dog is not just about giving it a home, it's to help that dog to feel safe enough to be him or herself. And so in relationships, that's exactly what we are doing. We
Absolutely. Mm.
we are we cannot be in a relationship where we cannot be free to be ourselves, which means expressing the the beautiful part of us as
Mhm.
well as the more problematic part of us.
Absolutely. I had a client recently who said that when she met her husband, she told him all the negative things about her right away. I'm a bitch when I get angry. And she told him everything, and not to discourage him, but because she didn't want him to over idealize her instinctively after being married to two very problematic relationships. This was going to be her third. And she said, I wanted him to know who I was right off the bat. And he said, I'll take my chances. And he continued to get to know her. Well, they have a beautiful relationship now, and they're together 8 years. They're on vacation right now. I talked to her a few days ago before they left because I want to give them a painting for their anniversary that's coming up. And what she said was uh, that yes, her Mars is very active and his is very subdued. And so, therefore, she was a technicolor mirror for what he needed to become. She could show him how to stand up for himself finally, to deal with the people at work. And she would encourage him, and he saw how she handled things. So eventually they started to be more like each other instead of two lopsided people. And that is the sacred marriage. That is the mystical union. That is what love can accomplish. When you love a person enough to not stay polarized, but to recognize the strengths in each other and to let that real person come out, and then notice that, I really like that about you, even though you told me you're a bitch. You get super mad when you get mad. And then he's like super nice. Well, if the wounds start coming up because she was abused as a child, or she lived in a house where her mother was abused, or there was emotional or physical abuse going on, and sometimes physical abuse is easier than emotional and psychological abuse because you don't even know you're being abused, right? So she learned to defend herself growing up and thought, I can't be like you. You're too nice. If I'm like you, then people will walk all over me. And then after being around him, he was so nice when she would be upset that she started to it's instinctive. You start to take on the characteristics of that person. You do. They become more like you become more like them. If there's a harmony there, if there's love there between two people, that is the magic of relationship that goes the distance. And it isn't that you're changing that person, they change, they grow from being in your presence.
Exactly. And again, just that coming back to that opposite, that axis of the ascendant to descendant, that is you. It's not the other person,
Yes.
you, because it's in your chart. That's who you are. But when you're looking at the other person, what you're doing is, or when you're looking at the other person through the filter of the descendant, what you may well be doing is saying, I like you. I would like to be like you, but I
I am
can't.
like you in the unconscious.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that when we recognize that that's a part of us and we own it, then we're much more complete. And that means then that we are, as you use the word harmony, better able to harmonize with another because, and also I think we're less likely to become unhealthily dependent on the other as well, because we feel that sense of completion within ourselves.
So it's interdependent instead of codependent.
Yeah.
That is, to me, that's the only way that a relationship can survive. Because if it's one up and one down, that's power, you know, and power does not work. Somebody ends up being abused or somehow psychologically abused, and power is not love. There's a quote by Carl Jung: logically, the opposite of love is fear. And it's a beautiful quote. I have a painting. I did a framed picture of it in my office in the other room. But it's definitely, I don't even remember now what I'm talking about. What am I talking about?
Love, fear, being opposites. And
Okay.
and
Well, the
yeah,
opposite, you were saying, the opposite is in the unconscious. So you're needing to see that instead of trying to be one up and trying to be in power over the other person, which so many relationships begin that way, not just Plutonians. It's a power struggles is common in a situation when there's a lot of fear.
yes, and often the fear is one of not getting our own way. So we want to control the situation to make sure that everything goes our way. So again, these are all um, issues that need to be teased out, um, so that we have the confidence and the strength to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
I think it does take a certain amount of strength and confidence to be
Yeah.
able to be fair. It's when we're in fear that we are incapable of being fair because we are only concerned with self-protection.
Exactly.
And that's that self-protection, that impulse to protect ourselves then leads to controlling behavior, um, and so on. So I think that's that, and of course the other fear would be of abandonment,
Yes.
because I'm now going to do whatever you say because abandonment is a big thing for me. So you can see these dynamics playing out in different ways and in different relationships. And the seventh house actually gives us some huge clues as to what that dynamic is going to be. And then the eighth and the 12th will answer how and why.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Well, you know, this is a big, big thing. So tell us about how you're working with people in your workshops.
Okay. Well, I've created a 6-week workshop. And the first week is we look at how do we recognize our shadow? What are all the different ways that you can do that? And I get them to actually do the pen and paper work. They have to sit down and write, what did I, like about what did I like about this person? What I dislike about this person? Why did they push my buttons? They have to write, because if you don't journal and you don't get it on paper, you can't bring it to the surface as well. So that's the first step, first week. The second week is our mother and our father and our seventh house, because we marry our parents. We all do, whether we know it or not. And nobody stands there saying, I can't wait to marry my parents. It's unconscious, because they're in us, they're inside us. And so they're going to be reflected in our partners as well. And we're not going to be attracted to anybody unless they're like us. They have the same complexes we do. It is remarkable. And every time I put two people's charts together, you can see how they've split it up. I'll be this part of you if you'll be this part of me, because I don't like that part of me and you do it really well. So that's the second week is our mother and our father, and how those relationships, those primary relationships, influenced who we pick even. Freud says there's 6 people in the bed, their parents, our parents, and us. So there's 6 people we're dealing with. And then the third week is about falling in love, that magic mystery of why we fall in love with who we fall in love with, and how to stay conscious when you're going through that blissful experience. So that's my third week. And then the fourth week is, okay, now let's look at your seventh house. So I get people to look at the planet or that is in the seventh, planets, if there are several, and the ruler of the seventh house, and the sign that's on that cusp is the ruler. Look at that planet and see what it's an aspect to, and any oppositions, and Venus, how Venus is in aspect to other planets. And then the sign Venus is in, and the house Venus is in, and what does Venus mean to everybody? And I'm working with people who are not astrologers. So I give them some basics, and I tell them, you're not going to learn astrology. That took years and years and years and obsession to learn it. What you're going to learn is what are your requirements for this lifetime to become a more balanced human being, so that you can share that with another person instead of project it. And so that's what my fourth week is about. And that's a huge topic, but we do it. I've got handouts that everybody can print before they come, and hopefully read before that week. So the fourth week is focused on that. Then the fifth week is communication. How do you communicate what your needs are? And how do you communicate when you're upset or hurt? And what is not communication? Because communication is not lecturing, right? It is not making pronouncements. It is not interrupting. So I go through all the different scenarios of what communication is not and what communication is. And so I go through that and get them to do an exercise on that. And then the sixth week is really going into more of what Carl Jung called individuation, which is looking at our wholeness and why we want to be whole and complete, and how we have assigned other people to carry parts of us. And then what the mystical marriage is, love. And I, have slides and stuff that I show for the alchemists and how that came from the Emerald Tablet. And then I talk about what Jesus said in the Gospel of St. Thomas. So I kind of go into that. And then at the very end, it's like, these are the reasons that you want to do shadow work. So it's a 6-week course. And I do it on Zoom. I just started doing this. I'm only on my second I completed my second webinar last night. And the third one starts August 26th. And it's in Central Standard Time at 6:30, from 6:30 to 8. And then I have an in-person workshop. And I'm on my fourth one next. The third one is ending tomorrow. And so the next time I start again, it'll start from 1. And um, I'm not really out there in the community that much. So bringing people in has been a challenge, but 5 or 6 people around my table until I have more people where I have to leave my house, I'm limiting it to 8 people.
Yeah.
And that's plenty to process with. So it's an
It,
in-depth
yeah.
thing at my house. It is in depth. And it's much more fun in person because the conversations are fabulous. It brings up a whole lot more than just a script. And people are, kind of shy on Zoom and aren't going to share. And then somebody will share too much. And then you have to interrupt. And so it is a challenge to do online courses. So the next webinar that I do, I'm going to actually video it and make it where it can be sold as a package and they can just buy it.
Yeah.
And I'll
Good.
keep
Well, that's a very good outline. It did make me smile when you were talking about, marrying our parents, because just at the weekend I had the most graphic uh, astrological example of this, where I was looking at a client's chart and I was doing some work with her, and the chart pointed to her grandmother being rather one of her grandmothers being very important, and and it was her paternal grandmother. And I was looking at the paternal grandmother, i.e. the part of the chart that represents that, because there's a turned chart. And I was using the same language to describe her paternal grandmother as I had used to describe her mother. So there was her father having married a woman very like her mother.
mother. Exactly.
And the two women did not get on. They did not get on. They were rather similar.
That's why.
Yeah.
You want to hear something amazing? Even if you don't get married, you will go make somebody into your parents. My
Uh,
son,
yes.
my son has 5 planets in Libra, 3 in Sag. His Mars is conjunct my Mars in Sag. We both have planets in Sag. And he lived with a guy renting a room from him for 15 years who is a Libra with the moon in Sag. He found his mother in that partner, in that rent person he rented a room from. And his best friend is a Libra with 3 planets in Libra and very Virgo. And I'm a Sun Mercury conjunction. So I'm extremely analytical, where he's a Mercury Venus conjunction. So his best friend and where he rented for 15 years were his mother, both of them. And they
Yeah.
both and they both would call me. We can't get him to do this or that. His moon's in Taurus. So he's like super Taurus. He's very super Taurus. Fortunately, my Jupiter's there. So we get along quite well. And he actually has come home because he's starting a completely new career as a sushi chef. And that's what COVID did for him. He had to go stop his own business. He took 6,000 hours of sushi classes or classes in cooking and started a new career. So he's moved back home since he hadn't lived here since he was 25. And he's 41. My birthday's September 26th. I turned 72, and his birthday's October 5th, and he turns 42. So he turned other people into his parents, right?
And that is the case, because really what we're saying is that we work through our issues,
With other
which
people.
are to do with our early years and the beliefs and perceptions that we have of the world based on our experience with our parents. And so that then gets projected into other relationships as we have to work through those, because we're really working on ourselves. So, Rebecca, this is beautiful work. And if people want to find you, how do they do that?
Well, shadowdance.com is my website. And just real quickly, I'd like to show you all my book. This is the Shadow Dance and the Astrological Seventh House Workbook. And it is a workshop in itself. And it has places to write notes to yourself on the sides, and then things you have to actually do to do the work. So it is a workbook as well. So I have a book that I've written, and I'm working on another book now. So shadowdance.com, and I'm on YouTube and TikTok. The younger generation convinced me to do TikTok. I'm not really good at that, but I'm doing it. And all the other social media platforms, X, wherever, all of them, Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook. That's it.
Great. Okay. Well, I will be putting a link to your website in the description box so that everybody can find you easily. And I am very much looking forward to your book. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for writing to me again.
You're very welcome. It's a joy to have you back. And and next time we are going to be looking at the sun in the chart. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye.